The files, the files, the files. This is all we should be talking about. This is all the news should be talking about. I mean, I know there's other things that seem important, but really there's nothing as important as this. So today on Metatron's Not the News, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about this book by Virginia Giuffre, and I want to talk about a new lawsuit that just got filed in Palm Beach, Florida. And everything I have to say is allegedly and for entertainment purposes because this is not the news. So let's do a book review first of this wonderful book. And, I'm going to call it wonderful and I'm going to call it gruesome at the same time because some books are like that, right? Like, this is the kind of book that you want to tell everyone to read, but you also don't want to tell anybody to read. It's a page turner, but not really in a good way. It's a nail biter, but again, not in a good way. It's a super necessary book, a groundbreaking book, a book that will be remembered. It's also a book that once you finish, you want to quickly forget. It's the kind of book that when you're done, you feel like you need a shower, you need to brush your teeth, you might need to get into a sauna, and maybe go on vacation for a while. If you have any kind of background with essay or with PDFery, I do not recommend that you read this book. However, if you are of the male gender, I highly recommend that you read this book so that you have some understanding of what it's like for so many women. If you care about the PDF in chief, if you care about our current circus, you should read this book. Now, let me just talk about a couple of passages in the book that I think are particularly relevant to the circus right now. One is a section, and I was going to look for it and read it, but I couldn't find it. And, every time I have to go through and skim it, it's not a pleasant experience. So I'm not really trying to do that. So I'm going to try to, from memory in this book review, tell you what I heard, what she said. So at one point, she spends a lot of time in the house of Epi, and I think she even lives there for a while. And so she's very familiar with it, and she describes the contents of this house quite a bit. And at one point, she describes how, one day, I guess he trusted her after, exploiting her for a number of months or years. I forget at what point in the story this happened. He decides to show her this back room he has, which is filled with little TVs, monitors, showing that he had video cameras in every room. And he often would invite these, famous people and, political figures and really prominent people from around the world to his house and say, oh, you can use my house. And we know this from the emails that have come out. So if you've been following the emails, there are a lot of emails in there that show he kept offering prominent people access to his home and said, oh yeah, just come over and I'll leave you the key and you can use my home. And we know why. We now know why, because of Virginia, right? She's like, yeah, he was recording everything. And so then he was able to use this for extortion and blackmail. And so that's what Virginia tells us. And there's a lot of kind of evidence to suggest that in the emails that have come out. And also Rosie, the psychic on YouTube, has done a whole analysis of an article that came out, I think in the New York Times or the New Yorker, by an investigative journalist who also talked about the use of extortion and blackmail in his ring of bad traffic. So why is this important? Because those videotapes were seized. Those videotapes are what form part of what we call the files, right? So the files are not like a bunch of documents. It's videotapes, audio tapes, photographs. Another thing that Virginia tells us, that he had this whole studio of photographs of young girls in various states of undress that he kept as trophies. And he took one of her, Maxwellian took a picture of her to send to him to add to his collection. And so all of those photos are also in the files. And this is why so many people, especially in the circus, are trying to keep them from being disclosed, because all that photographic proof is going to incriminate a lot of circus leaders around the world and a lot of tech bros and a lot of celebrities, etc. And most of us are getting super impatient waiting for these files to come out, especially when we keep getting more and more information to let us know what is in them. So an article came out just a couple of days ago in the Boca News. I've also found it on WION. It's now being discussed in Raw Story. There are now several different news sources all talking about this lawsuit. And lo and behold, Starboy is also mentioned in this lawsuit. So in this lawsuit, which is for $310 million, it is alleged that a certain circus clown, head PDF in chief, and Starboy, and another tech bro, what should we call him? We used to have a name for him. Let me think. Let's say William Frontgate. They're all named in this suit. And in the suit, this woman victim says that they had a bad traffic venture identical to the bad traffic venture of a certain epi. Right? And I'm just going to read straight from the Boca News now. According to the complaint, the plaintiffs claim the defendants engaged in coercion, retaliation, and misappropriation of intellectual property while benefiting financially and politically from proprietary technology. They allege that their trafficking scheme follows a structure, quote, identical in every material respect, unquote, to Epstein's. And they put the whole suit in the article so you can read it yourself. And what's interesting is that the plaintiff says that they used every method against her to keep her quiet. Physical threats, trying to unalive her and make it look like an accident, all kinds of stuff. Now, this rings some bells for us, doesn't it? We have a whole lot of suspicious accidental unalivings that seem to be happening. Constellation of people related to the files of Epi, including Epi himself, Virginia herself, and there's a whole list. I talked about this before. There's a whole list of people who were either lawyers for Epi or somehow were familiar with the case who, showed up missing or suddenly were no more, despite not being ill. And remember, we've heard from the survivors who have explicitly said that they're afraid to name names because everyone who does name a name ends up suspiciously no longer with us. And recall, I have told you in the past, what my guide said. Always forget about the mic. That this is like the Gamble gang, right? Remember the story of the Gamble gang? This is a gang. This is a mob. This is a syndicate. This is a crime family that we're talking about in the story. And this is how mob families work. They intimidate, they engage in acts of violence, extortion, blackmail. This is like run-of-the-mill stuff that you find in gangs like the Gamble gang in my story. Now, as hard as it is to hear all of this, to read these articles, to read this book, to read books, there's other books coming out, this is really good news that it's coming out, that the revelations are happening. And some of you may recall that my guides did say quite a while ago, and have said again and again, that this is all coming out. There's no hiding this. They're going to try to hide it. There have been a lot of efforts for a long time to hide it, but it is coming out. There are several ways in which it can come out. This is one way, survivors' testimonies. Another way is the 3-letter agency, whistleblowers, and of course there are overseas sources. And then, of course, there are co-conspirators who are trying to save themselves, who will rat out who they have to rat out to avoid jail time. Bottom line is the story isn't going anywhere. As we can see, more and more stuff is dribbling out daily. And our one and only job is to keep the pressure on. Call the reps if you have to, post videos about this, keep this story going. This nail is the most important nail in the coffin of the circus.